Hello and welcome. Some of you may have already joined and accepted the challenge of the isolation dance challenge that I'm creating during this strange COVID-19 moment in time to get us all moving, motivated, and feeling good. If you haven't joined already and it's before May 6th, you can still join. If you've joined and haven't invited friends, you can still invite friends. On May 6th, though, we get started with the challenge with a few daily prompts. I want to talk in this video about isolations. And I'm not talking about the type of quarantined isolations where we're all stuck in our homes, which is very relevant. I'm talking about the type of isolations that we do in our bodies. So let's dive into that here in this video. Just a little heads up, one of the daily prompts is going to be how to incorporate isolations into your dance. So for those of you who like to geek out on educational things and learn new moves, you're going to love this video. And I always encourage any expression for this challenge. It's about showing up. It's not about how you show up. But that said, I think some of you are really going to like getting a little more insight on body isolations. This video is going to be a broad overview. It's not going to be about teaching you the exact moves. I do have the online courses that do that, and I also have some free courses on YouTube. This is going to be about broad strokes. What is an isolation, and what are some examples of isolations that you can use in your dance? So let's start with what is not an isolation. So when we are dancing and when we're moving, whatever way that we move, if your whole body is moving and your whole spine and your head is shaking, all of these are examples of what's not an isolation. The moves might be able to be done in isolation, but when I'm moving my hips, for example, say I'm doing a shimmy and my hands are swinging, that means I'm not isolating. Versus here, you can see the only part of my body that is the focus is my hips. And it's coming from the knees, but again, that's a technical thing. So this would be a shimmy isolation, and this would be a shimmy movement while I'm just flowing and not isolating. So I think at the end of this video, we're gonna play a little game of isolating versus not isolating that you can incorporate into your dance. So let's start with getting into what I call home position, because when you're in home position, your spine is aligned and elongated. The main bone structures of your body are already kind of pulled apart in our home position, so it makes it a lot easier to isolate and separate these different areas. So I'm gonna walk you into what is the belly dance home position. And again, this challenge is not just for belly dance, but that is my greatest anchored gift. So that's gonna be what we focus on here. So as far as isolations, so we're going to bend the knees, then we're going to tuck the pelvis so that the sacrum is nice and long, okay? So one thing that can happen is if you're not in alignment and you try to lift your chest, you can be popping the whole spine. I'm gonna turn the music down. Okay, now I'm not yelling so much. So here we are, knees are bent, the pelvis is tucked, and then now we're going to open the upper vertebrae a little bit and lift the chest up so that the rib cage actually lifts away from the hips. From there, we're gonna roll the shoulders up, back, and down. I like to say that we're tucking the shoulder blades into the back pocket. So here we are in home position where we are going to start our isolation options. So let's go from the ground up. If we're going to do anything vertical in the hips, we are actually going to use the knees. So technically, it's not completely an isolation because you're using one body part to influence the other, but if you're just trying to highlight the hips, nobody would even know you're doing the knees if you're wearing a skirt. This would be a hip isolation up to down. or I should say a hip lift up to down. But what makes it an isolation is that we're not affecting the rest of this home position. You can also do a twist, which is a little bit harder because a lot of times when we twist, we move our arms just like this. So this is not isolation and this is isolation. So you can play with those two going back and forth. When you're twisting, you want to keep the vertebrae long, so we're sticking to that home position, and that way we don't get messy in starting to like twist and change our planes. So when I'm talking about planes, I'm talking about up to down is a vertical plane, side to side is a horizontal plane, or you can also go front to back. Like this is all horizontal, but there's no up and down. If I were to add an up to down, I might do something like this, which is an omi. And all of these can be considered isolations when doing them in separate body parts. So let's think of the pelvis, let's think of the rib cage, let's think of the shoulders and the head. These are all potential different places we can isolate. So here we are in our home position, bent, tucked, drop, lift, shoulders roll back, boom. I like to shoot it out through the fingers just to make sure I'm extending the energy all the way out instead of having limp hands. So we have this up to down hip isolation, and you can take that to just the left hip, for example, by leaning the weight to the right and doing a little side crunch. This is super good for abs. Or you can switch sides and do it on the other. So this in itself can be a single hip isolation because nothing else is moving. You can frame it with the hands and you can turn at any angle. In fact, one thing I like to do is sometimes do what I call the belly dance sprinkler and add the twist to it. Because we're doing this as like a spotlighted move, I would consider this an isolation even though we're adding two moves together. What would not be an isolation is if I actually turn my whole body. You see how my whole body's going with my hips? So this is me trying to do the sprinkler, but not isolating the pelvis from the chest. Now here I am doing an isolation where, as you can see, my chest is continuing to point forward, so it really highlights the movement that we're working on, which is the sprinkler. Again, this is not a technique video, so I'm just trying to give options. So even the shimmy, which is the up to down but done really fast, can be an isolation as long as you don't let it affect the rest of your body. If we were to do a double knee bounce, it would be impossible to do an isolation because your whole body is bouncing from the knees up. But when we do a shimmy, it becomes possible to isolate just the hips because we are absorbing the different timing in the torso. So when we do it together, there's no way the torso can absorb. But when we do it in split time, which is like 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, this song is getting me like all hypey. Let me change it. Okay, that playlist, I guess, is on shuffle. So we're all along for the ride. Nice, relaxed song. Here we are in the shimmy. Okay, so I don't want to overwhelm with information, so let's just review some of the ways that we can isolate with the pelvis. Bent, tucked, drop, lift the rib cage away, and then instead of having uptight shoulders, we're going to bring them up towards the ears, back and down. Let the armpits breathe a little bit. Share your fragrance with the room. Okay, so now by lifting ever so slightly one knee and then the other, we are here in the up to down hip isolation. And alternatively, we leave the knees in their bent position and we can explore the twist isolation, keeping especially the hands and the arms nice and still, keeping the heart lifted and everything else in home. We can take that to a side view and we can add the up to down with it and even combine them, keeping the upper body and the frame exactly where it is. You can choose a position. You may have seen me do this mudra before because it's on a picture. choose a hand position and continue to do the isolation, but again, you don't want to be moving the hands at the same exact time. You can go in and out of non-isolation movement into isolation movement, which makes it look all the more awesome. So just like we have the hip twist, there's also the ability just to slide the hips in a, what kind of plane is this? Pop quiz? Good, you got it. Oh, virtual worlds. This is a horizontal plane because we are not moving up to down. If I were to bring that into a vertical plane, it would look like this, which I call Big Mama hips. So we have the slide, we have the lifts, and we have the twists. Let's stop there with the hips. Let's move up to the chest and the rib cage, which is the next main skeletal cavity that we're going to work with. A lot of times when we're talking about isolations and when we're talking about belly dance in general, we are really working with the skeleton of the body, the pelvis, the ribs, and the skull and the spine that links it all together. So let's go into our home position, roll the shoulders back and down, and we're just going to do a vertical motion where we lift the heart as much as we can up towards the ceiling and we drop it. And when we drop it, it's actually puffing out the upper back. So this is going to be an up and drop, up and drop, up and drop, up and drop. If you wanted to accent the drop, after you lift, you would pull in your upper abs to make that we're getting into like pop and lock kind of vibes, but you could be like boom, 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 and boom. Now the music's chill, so I have to do my booms. Or you can hit on the up, which would be like lift and lift and lift and lift. So we're popping on the beat on the lift. So this is a very good beginning. I mean, this is not just beginning, this is all of belly dance incorporates this, but this is a good starting point, I should say, to isolating the ribs. And you're gonna want to open up the solar plexus as you lift and then drop. So in my course, I have a good warm up that helps you open and expand in the ribs and contract. But for today, I'm doing broad strokes. So we have this lift and drop. And now let's go ahead and stay gently lifted, not to the full extreme, but basically finding that home position again. Taking the bottom of the rib cage, we're going to slide. So just like we did with the hips, we are now on a horizontal plane and sliding. Now what makes this in isolation is that the lower belly is tucked and it's locked into an anchor point. So after we lift, the legs are like a tree trunk. The weight is on both feet and it does not transfer. The weight does not transfer. That means we are truly isolating and truly moving from this section of the body. Now, let me show you what's not in isolation. What's not in isolation is when we start sliding the ribs, but we lean the weight. So I'm still doing a rib slide. I'm still doing the move, but I'm not doing it in isolation. I'm layering, which is fantastic. But again, it looks super awesome when you go from kind of a loosey-goosey movement and then you go whoop, lock in, and you do a very isolated, clean movement. And it feels really good to go from one to the other. So here we go. We have these slides, and back to our center, we have the lifts and the drops. From there, you can combine them into a slide lift, slide drop, which is a vertical circle. And if you don't do the lift and instead you go back and front, that is a horizontal circle. So I think I might be running on the line of saying too much information, but some of you have taken classes before, some of you are skilled in dance, some of you are like, I don't know, I just joined a challenge and joined this link. But regardless, take what you'd like. And again, the main thing is, what is an isolation? And you can incorporate an isolation like this, boom, boom, hey, hey, little flirty shoulder, because again, I'm focusing on this joint. I'm focusing on this place. So one thing you can do with isolations is go, oh, here's my shoulder, and then go, whoop, oh, now it's down to my fingers, and now I'm gonna do finger rolls, and now we're isolating here. So you can take the attention from one part of the body and bring it to another. Let's do that on the other side because that was a lot of fun. Drop, tap, drop the chest, lift, and here we go, shoulder, or let's start in our nice open hearted position. That's when the shoulders roll back and down. And let's lift that shoulder into a nice little flirty lift. This is just a silly little move that you can choose to play with as an example. And now let's take that down into the hand and so do some wrist rolls, however that feels for you. So now we are in a wrist roll move. And you could take that into a snake arm, whoop, and over to the other side and isolate. Now, see how much more distracting it is when everything else is moving, where you're just like, yeah, oh, and now I'm gonna do this, and now I'm gonna do this. It still is really cool looking and really fun and gooey, but again, isolations are ways that you can highlight different movements, change the focus in your body, and change the place that we are highlighting, change the place that you are bringing energy to. So right now we're not working on performance technique, although isolations are great for performance because it's like magic. You're like, look over here, oop, you didn't even see, but now I have a coin here. Right now we're focusing on mental and physical health, so you are bringing energy and chi to these different parts of the body. We have the hips, we have the ribs, and just for fun, we're going to do a little slide in the neck and the face. It's called the neck slide, so that we get each part of the body a little attention in this video. So what I like to do to start off is we all go 2 thumbs up, then we bring the knuckles together, and you want to keep your gaze looking straight forward. So this might be weird while you're watching the video, although it could work because you're looking straight forward at me. And then we're going to bring the chin over to the thumb. You don't want to look and you don't want to like lift up and down. So we're going for the clean slide. So here we go, slide, 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 slide. If you've got that feeling down, your chin is nice and level, the next step would be bringing the hands up and imagining that there's floss in between your elbows and you're cleaning out your ears so you can hear me even better now. So there we go. Let's just do the slides just for fun. I'll let you see it. This is stuff that you can practice without me. Again, I'm not leading you through the how-to. I'm like a very detail-oriented teacher, so broad strokes are hard for me. But for now, broad strokes. Let's go. Bend, tuck, drop, lift, shoulders back. Now hips, slide, 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 slide. And then now let's move into the ribs. Slide, slide, slide. Let's move up to the head and slide. So practicing how can you transition. When I transition, there is a little overlap. So for example, I'm doing both the ribs and the hips, but after I transition and I focus on just the ribs, I'm gonna lock into a grounded tree trunk legs so that I can find an anchor point to then isolate this part from. Same with the head. I might go a little bit overlap. It might be a little bit messy for a minute, and then I find a place where I feel like I just leave the chest where it is. I feel like it's suspended in space, nice and strong, or like a hook on the chest, lifting it and holding it. Good. Okay, so let's play a little game. It's gonna be called isolation, not isolation. So let's just start dancing into a non-isolation. Just get, sloppy, get fun with it. Just do it. Let's move into an isolated motion. However, whatever feels good for you. I don't even know what I'm gonna do. This is improv. So I am moving the hands. Sometimes if I want to just highlight that isolation, that's called layering, or you can again just frame it. But you want to try to really focus on what body part you're moving. Now let's move into a non-isolation movement. So we're doing non-isolations. Let's move into an isolated movement. I'm gonna go for a hip circle. Trying to keep my chest still. If you feel like layering on purpose, you can do 2 isolations, which is now I'm doing snake arms and hips, or you can just frame. Let's move into another isolation. I'm gonna go for a chest lift. Habibi. Changing sides, sticking with my 1 isolation. Try not to pop your back out, okay? So this is a non-isolation. We're gonna move into non-isolations. We can do like a Beyonce shimmy is what I call. We're just letting the whole body, and now into the isolation. Lock into the lower belly. Shoulder isolations, front and back. Good, and then just like whatever, doing like hip hop or whatever you want. Turn your back to me. So we're doing non-isolated movements. The whole body is engaged. And let's plant into home, plant. Tuck, drop, lift. Let's go for the seesaw hips. I'm gonna get a little creative here. So you could also, boom, add the shoulder lift with the hip lift. Let's turn it up to the side and just do the shoulder. Slide it over to the hand, bring it into wrist rolls. As we switch sides and now shoulder. These are just loose suggestions. This is not a class. This is a isolation overview. Good, now shake everything. Relax your face. We're gonna go into a double knee bounce. That means that everything is moving. If you are on your period and your boobs are sore, I'm sorry, not sorry. It's good for your lymph nodes. If you don't have boobs, don't worry. This is this is for men and women. So taking the bounce that's happening and then moving it only into the hips by split time. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Isolation shimmy. Let your fat on the legs jiggle. Good, maybe try to lift the arms, shimmy with a layer. And at that, I'd like to say thank you. I think my phone, no, I thought my phone cut me off. Phew! That video is longer than expected. Enjoy.